All right, this is the second video for Chapter 1, AP Environmental Science. And this is the definition that I promised you in the first video, just kind of looking at what sustainability is. We've talked about it a little bit, just the idea of using resources in a way that future generations will also have access to them as well. One thing just to kind of make a connection with that is like gasoline, oil. Right now in this year, 2021, the projection is that we have, and I'm not sure exactly how this is measured, but I've seen it a few different times, about 42 years left of oil or gasoline. Now, I would suspect that there is more time than what that predicts for, but then, of course, the cost may make it like an unsustainable endeavor going after. And you can look at it for other things as well. So, for example, like copper in the UP. Once upon a time, that was a big deal, copper in the UP. There's still copper up there. It's just not economically viable to go after. And we can go on and on. There's lots of different examples. All right, so let me move on to the next slide here. Population growth, and economic development. So as you can see, as the economy grows, more people get stuff to do stuff with. So we're really good at that. We have a lot of economic growth here in the United States. And then using that development, economic growth, we use that to improve our living standards. So this is how various countries in the world can become more of a developed country. This is typically what we're talking about, that they have a robust economy that can help everyone lift people out of poverty. All right. Speaking of such, this is a look at, and this is a little bit crude, but it gets the point across, looking at how different parts of the world are in regards to economic development. So we're just putting this in two different categories, developed versus developing. And you can see that looking at the left-hand side in regards to population, really the vast majority of the world is considered developing. Not developed or fully developed. And based on population, it's 15 times in regards to the growth of those populations, 15 times more people that are developing in comparison to developed. So nations that are developed, like us, our populations are rather stable. And there's a few different reasons for that, but we can just leave it at that for now so we don't get into a broad conversation. We can do that in class. But also looking at the income, you can see that again, developed, us, the vast majority of the wealth is within our countries. So even though the other countries are much more people, they don't have the wealth. Now again, even though we are much less of the population, resources, we use by far more resources than developing countries. And then, in turn, we also use a lot more pollution. On the right side, so disregard those colors and everything on the left. On the right-hand side, you can take a look at poverty. And we are listed somewhere, as you would expect, us in Canada. Very, very low poverty as a nation. Of course, we do have poverty in our own country. Absolutely. But as an average or a whole, comparatively speaking, it's low. And then you can look at other places in the world that have very, very high poverty. And again, that's not every single person, but that is the country as a whole. So resources, we generally throw these into three different categories. And it's not completely black and white. Perpetual, the one resource that really is considered perpetual, really the only one that's considered perpetual, is sunlight. Sunlight, no matter what, is just going to keep on shining. Renewable resources are things that we can just use. If we're using them responsibly, we can use them over and over and over again. So these are things, for example, like biomass. So wood, water, the air, these are all considered renewable. But if we use them in an unsustainable way, they can become perishable, non-renewable. So just look at things that are considered non-renewable. Water can be considered non-renewable if we don't use it properly. Other things we can look at would be like fossil fuels. We will run out of those over a period of time. And then metals, there's only so much of them. So even though you're recycling them, it's not always 100% return. Sometimes you lose some in the mix. That's a picture in the book. I don't know what's going on here. Apparently he's recycling. Good job. Okay, footprint. This is probably a new concept for you. It's a really good one, and we'll do an activity on it in the lab at some point. But first, we'll take a look at those upper charts there. The total ecological footprint and share of global biological capacity. And you can see how different regions of the world, this isn't a perfect, complete list, but it gives us a general idea. You can see that the United States and the EU use quite a bit of resources. And then it kind of goes down the list. Even with China, this was made a couple of years ago. Gosh, they're moving up the chart fast. So I wouldn't be surprised if they passed the EU up based on when this was made. Now, the per capita, that is quite interesting because it changes. And looking at how the United States starts to far exceed its neighbors, twice as much as the EU and much, much more than China. Even though China has this blasting, crazy economy, the per capita is still relatively small in comparison. We all do well, on average, in comparison to the rest of the world. Now, there's a potential problem in line with that. And again, we'll do an activity which is looking at your ecological footprint. Sometimes we call it a carbon footprint, but ecological footprint is looking at a broader conversation and total resources that we use. And you can kind of see that as long as you're living below that line, which represents one Earth, we only have one, we're sustainable. But somewhere in the mid-80s or so, we stretched into what's considered no longer sustainable. In other words, we need more resources than one Earth. We only have one. And you can see that it keeps going in the wrong direction. We need more and more. We'll do an activity where you will determine individually how many Earths we would need if everyone lived like you. So you can kind of see as we're moving on here, we have a optimistic projection on the bottom and a less than optimistic projection pointing towards the top. Now, something is not sustainable. It cannot do this forever. Eventually it has to correct because, again, we only have one Earth. So changes have to be made. And this is just kind of carrying that forward. I won't talk about this. If you want, you can pause it and read through that. Okay, so some of the problems that go along with this plan that we've been doing, this non-sustainable plan, is the pollution. And so what's the problem with pollution? Well, in a normal environment, things cycle. So everything in the world has gone through a system of trades where one thing's waste is something else's resource. And there's a balance for that. And it's a interesting, beautiful exchange that happens naturally in the world. We're messing that up a little bit because we are kind of new in how we do this. So we create all this pollution, and some of that pollution, think plastics, nothing acts on it. So we made this out of nothing. It's called synthetic, and it doesn't fit into the natural composition. So this stuff lasts seemingly forever. And it can mess up other life-supporting systems. And everything else on there you can kind of see, those are all problems as well. All right, this is a couple of vocab words that we should remember. Natural capital is like an overall of things that are resources and what they do for us, the services. And natural services are things that nature does for free. The classic example I like to use, which is not on this, is like honeybees or any pollinator. They go through this process of pollinating things for us for free, and we don't have to do anything for it. So all of the things that we need, fruits, vegetables, and such, they do all this pollinating for us, and we don't have to do anything in exchange. It's just all for free. But you can kind of see that what some of these resources are and the service they provide for us in that kind of goldish, brownish color for us that kind of naturally cleans up any potential waste that's out there. Okay, so again, we're at about 10 minutes here. I'm going to take a pause, and then I'll come back for one last lecture after this one.